Okay, we're live. Welcome to Dynasty Saturday Night 5 Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast for the Going for Two Live Network. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review if you're listening on audio. If you're watching us here on YouTube or the Twitch or the whatever else we're streaming on, like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz. Feed the algorithm. If you're watching on Twitter, we can't see your comments, so hop on over here to YouTube and hang out with us in the chat. My name is Brian Ford. As always, I'm here with my co-host Josh Walker. Josh, how you doing?
Doing great. Happy to have football back. Happy to see extreme overreactions on Twitter to one game. So, we're back.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I cannot wait for overreaction Mondays. This season gonna be a lot of fun, right? So,
Yep.
I don't really have a team. You're an Atlanta fan. You got to be feeling pretty good. At least better than last year. Arrow looks up on this team.
No, it really does. And even going back before the draft, I was for sure that the Saints or the Panthers, even immediately after, would be the teams to beat. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a three-way tie down to the finish and be really close. But I actually like the Falcons' chances.
Yeah, I do too. Like in that division, 9-10 wins. Like that's very possible. Jamie checking in the chat. What's up, fellas? With the appropriate fire emoji. Always good to have you on board, Jamie. So for those folks who don't know or don't remember, we do lists of 5 as the vehicle to talk about Dynasty Fantasy Football. But tonight it's a little redrafty, I guess, because we're sort of confining our bold predictions to the 2023 season. We'll probably talk a little bit about what it means from a dynasty perspective, should these things hit or whatever. But yeah, it's 2023 bold predictions. And in keeping with our theme of 5, when each of us gives a prediction, where the other person's gonna rate it on a scale of boldness from 1 to 5. 1 being not bold at all, and 5 being hella bold. Those are the official ratings, hella bold. Anything on your mind you want to talk about before we get going with paying the bills and doing the bold predictions? Any overreactions to Thursday or anything like that?
No, if you see anyone upset about Jahmyr Gibbs, just go ahead and send a trade offer, try and get him on your team. This was kind of expected. We kind of talked about how Montgomery would probably be the lead back, at least early on in the year. And that showed. So nothing too crazy. I did not, however, have you, Brian, saying hella on my 2023 bingo card. So
I say it a lot. I say it a lot, actually. In
never heard you say that. That's funny.
my private life. Yeah. Okay.
But no, I tried to do some of these with a little dynasty take to it, but most of these are kind of redrafted. Yeah. They're all gut calls. There's some data that backs up why I think it'll happen, but it's mostly just going with my gut on these.
Yeah. I saw Kadarius Toney get traded for a 2025 third. So we're at that point now with Mr. Toney. I'm not really.
It's probably someone who had Patrick Mahomes and is mad about that interception they gave him for hitting him in the helmet.
All right. Well, just a reminder, next week, cross fingers, finally, after some scheduling not mix-ups, but life happening and all that jazz. We're gonna have Jacob Sanderson on to unpack some NFL backfields and talk about his Hitchhiker's Guide to the running back galaxy, as it were. So yes, please make sure you tune in as always next week, September 16th. Time to pay some bills. The episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, and they have it all. Best ball draft season may be over, but they've got pick'ems for players and teams, and every week they've got DFS. You can do these 6-person, drafts and those sorts of things, right? And they're not just football; they've got every major sport. So if you're a degenerate or a weirdo like Josh, and you care about baseball or something else like that, I don't know. Are you into basketball or hockey? I have no time for anything these days. But yeah, they've got that. They've got golf. They've got all sorts of things there. So. Why am I talking about Underdog? Well, not only are they our wonderful sponsor, but if you are a new user at Underdog and you sign up a new account at Underdog, they will match your deposit of up to $100 if you use the promo code GF2. If you're watching here on the visuals, we've got a nice shiny QR code for you. Go to goingfor2.com, go to undertalk.com or the Underdog app. Do your first ever deposit on Underdog. Use promo code GF2, and they'll match $100 of your deposit. So you can start playing, maybe even start winning, and send us the cut, a cut, because we told you about the promo code. Now, like it's kind of good that the best ball drafts are over because I was getting a little out of control there. So,
yeah, I think it's just me moving. I haven't done hardly any Underdog best ball drafts, so it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I don't even like. At one point, I think like out of my 6 most rostered players, 4 of them were rookies, and it wasn't even like I intentionally did it or it's like my dynasty brain. It's just like there's some value there. Yeah. All right, so we have a super secret bold predictions because we did not tell each other these bold predictions. They will be revealed to each other live on air. So you're witnessing some really scintillating entertainment tonight. Josh, you want to start us off with your first 2023 bold prediction?
Yeah, I'll start off with the one I think is probably most likely to happen. And I was just talking about this player. He's one of my flag plants this year. I'm playing him in DFS this week. It's Jahan Dotson. And the bold prediction is that he'll finish in the top 15, maybe even top 12, and be drafted with Olave, Wilson, and other guys in his class next year in Dynasty. Just keep it short. I think he's just better than McLaurin. I really like Howell. I've liked Howell since last year and coming out of college. And I think that offense is going to be a little bit better than people expect. And I think the main person to achieve that will be Jahan Dotson. I think, especially where he's going, will be the best value on the team. Him and maybe Brian Robinson. But yeah, I think he's got a chance to finish top 12, top 15 this year. And if he does, that would definitely shoot him up with Olave, Garrett Wilson, all those other guys.
Okay. I like it. I'm a Dotson guy. He is, not the dynasty rankings or ADP are a reflection of, what someone's assessment of what will happen just in 2023. But, for the purposes of thinking about like where we are in the market, Dotson's usually in the 20s, as far as wide receivers go. So getting into the top 12 or 15 is certainly bold. It's above market. And I think also, the idea that he'll be drafted along with some of the other big names like Olave and all that makes it even more bold. So I'm gonna give this one a 3 out of 5 on the boldness scale. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah. I like Dotson a lot. All right, so let's see. Do you want me to do a top 15 wide receiver or?
Yeah, let's stay on par with that.
All right, so this is a parlay. Both of these players will be top 15 wide receivers, so they both have to hit for this prediction to be true. And that is that both Brandon Ayuk and Christian Watson will be top 15 wide receivers in total and or points per game in basic PPR scoring in 2023. Let me tell you a little bit about why it's at least slightly bold. I have Ayuk ranked at wide receiver 16 in Dynasty and across the board on KTC and Fantasy Calc and Fantasy Pros and DTC and DLF and Bulletproof's ADPs and that sort of thing. He's going in the 20s, often mid-late 20s, and even wide receiver 31 in DLF rankings. So it's definitely above market. We've already seen him be very good post-doghouse era with Kyle Shanahan. Last year, he was the wide receiver 17, I think, in total PPR points. And I think on a per-game basis, it was 23 or something like that. So he's already sort of ascending. I think he's a truer wide receiver than Debo. I think Debo is more of the running back wide receiver combo. I think that was a better fit for Jimmy G than for Brock Purdy. I think Ayuk fits Purdy a little bit better. And Debo was hurt by CMC coming aboard, really eating into anything that had to do with rushing. I don't think that Purdy needs as low an ADOT to succeed as Jimmy G does. So I think that favors Ayuk over Debo. And George Kittle, an aging tight end dependent on spike weeks and insane TD efficiency, I believe was 4th in target share when all 4 were healthy. Jamie probably knows that, and will pop up video. Fun fact that for us in the chat. But either Ayuk or either Kittle or Debo, I think were 4th. Yeah. So here, let's see. Jamie saying that Ayuk was wide receiver 14 last year in the chat. I went on Fantasy Pros and I believe it was 17. So I'll look that up. But yeah, that's my take on Ayuk. You know, he's a flag plant. He made Kittle and Debo both fallers for me on our last episode. So it's, you know, that's related, right? Ayuk's a flag plant for me this year. I have him at wide receiver 17 total in PPR last year, according to Fantasy Pros, and wide receiver 23 in points per game. Jamie, just FYI. So it would be a leap upward for Ayuk. I added Watson to this partly just to poke the bear. My partner Jesse on Dynasty Fever earlier in the week, we did our bold predictions episode, and he hates Christian Watson, thinks Watson is like the biggest sell in fantasy football and is overhyped. So I included him in the prediction just to, mess with Jesse. But I do believe in Watson. I've moved him sort of up and down in that, but he's always been in that huge tier, right? That like, wide receiver like 19 to 30 ish tier. Yep. That I have, the 1,000,001 wide receiver 2s. I've got him firmly at the top though, at 19 now, looking into it, which is right in line with KTC at 18. He tends to be in the late teens and 20s, so it's a little above market to call him, a top 15. This is really, I think, a reflection on as I move more and more towards the bet on talent and lean into upside and ceiling, approach to fantasy football. Mm-hmm. I think as the market gets sharper, there's ways to get an edge, and that is like, listen, we know volume is king, right? But now let's find like that talent that will command that volume, and maybe try to get on it early. And I think Watson's a strong candidate for that. So we've talked about fantasy points and all the great data that they have on their website. Ryan Heath, Fantasy Points, wrote a really good wide receiver article. And so Christian Watson's Yahoo redraft IDP is wide receiver 28, right? And there's like a million numbers to talk about what we would expect from Christian Watson. He was 7th best in yards per route run among all rookies since 2010. And if you do that, something called the TD adjusted yards per route run, he was 5th. In fact, 5th since 2007. Odell Beckham, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and 1 Christian Watson is number 5. He scored 3.1 more touchdowns than he should have given the opportunity. So that's something called, the expected touchdown differential. He led all wide receivers in high value targets among all players with over 60 targets. He led in expected touchdown opportunity and was top 3 in both deep target rate, which you're like, oh, wait, is he just a deep ball guy? But also inside the 10-yard line target rate of 10.4%. So that means he's more versatile than we think. He's not just a deep guy. And when we look at charting ADOT and yak per reception, you don't always expect a guy with a long ADOT to get a lot of yak per reception. He's a monster in the upper right-hand quadrant with AJ Brown and who's the other guy? AJ Brown and Jalen Waddle as far as that stat goes. When we look at expected versus actual fantasy points per route run, Watson's outperforming that on an opportunity basis more than Cooper Kupp in 2022. We go on and on and on. Anything you look at, even his touchdown rate and his air yard share playing in a partial season was really good, right? So even when you take out that like per stuff, the efficiency measures, and you look at totals, he's actually doing pretty good. Now, the argument against Watson is that, well, downgraded quarterback, he's kind of raw, doesn't run the best routes, doesn't have the best hands, had a few broken coverage plays last year, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're kind of nitpicking at a rather robust profile of a year two breakout, continued rise from a big athletic, freak wide receiver. Yes, downgrade in quarterback, but it's not like 2022 Aaron Rodgers with the broken thumb and mailing it in half the time was all that good to begin with, right? And if you want to say, oh, well, Green Bay is going to be bad, he had really good numbers when it came to when the team was trailing as well. I believe he was third among wide receivers in fantasy points per game while trailing, right? So, like, I know that there's reasons to like fade Christian Watson or at least be worried about him, right? Jordan Love question marks. The player himself, people have, compared him to Gabe Davis and Chase Claypool as like, it's fun. It's going to be boom bust. And he's going to essentially just, be one of those guys. I disagree. And so I'm saying I'm putting my chips in on Watson for 2023. And that also means in Dynasty as well. I probably had a few too many shares considering there are some question marks. So I did spin off Watson and Kamara for a first and 2 seconds. So I'm sort of balancing out and like hedging, but like I have a good number of shares, and I'm probably in some leagues looking to acquire more because I have a lot of faith on arrow up for Christian Watson. So both Ayuk and Watson, top 15 PPR wide receivers in 2023.
Yeah, funny. I almost did a little parlay like this, except I was going to do Debo and Ayuk both finishes top 15, top 20, but then I realized they have Brock Purdy as their quarterback, and I just don't see that happening, especially with all the other options they have. They got tons of depth. Out of a 5, the players standing alone, I'd probably do like 1 or 2 out of 5, but to get them both to do that, especially with Watson already missing a game week 1, I'll do 3 out of 5.
All right.
But I like Christian Watson too. I tried in our not a going for 2 staff league. I tried to trade for him from Zach Pulowski, but he has been all but one dynasty team, and he said,
"Oh yeah, and he's a Packers fan, so good luck with that."
Well, but also, I mean, it's hard to bet against someone who's 6'4" and runs, a 4.3, and he showed that he can produce last year. So it's not like Quentin Johnson coming in. We haven't seen him play. Like Watson, there's going to be regression in the touchdown department, but he at least showed he can ball. So I like it.
All right.
My next one, I'll go ahead just in case Jamie has something to do. I'll hit one that'll make Jamie happy. I'm going to say Roshan will finish as the Bears RB1, and this is without Khalil Herbert getting hurt. I think he's just a more dynamic back. I think it'll take him some time to get his legs under him, but I think his pass protection, receiving ability, and ability as a runner is just going to win out. And I think if there are 2 scenarios where this could happen. Either they're contending and they want their best players out on the field, especially to help Justin Fields out. Mm-hmm. And I think that could be Roshan, or they know they're not going to like compete too much. So they want to give Roshan a chance to get out there and get some work. So either way, I think he's going to see a good bit of third down snaps. He's good at receiving. He's a really good runner. And I do like Khalil Herbert. This isn't really anything about him. It's just, I've been higher on Roshan from the start. I've liked what I've seen so far in the preseason and stuff. And I think by the end of the year, he's going to be their back.
So I think it's plausible because I do think he has the most, if not depth of talent, breadth of talent, the most well-rounded skill set in that backfield. And talent will usually, rise to the top, right? So I do think it's plausible. It's bold in the sense that, the offense, we don't know even with the addition of DJ Moore, how much it's going to move the ball and score. And it's also bold because rookies often are, slow to start and are better in the second half of the year, or at least post-bye. So I will give you a.
Let me add a little something to it. I think he'll go in the top 30 of running backs next year too, as opposed to 50s where he's going now. Because if he's the lead back, I mean, Khalil Herbert's going around that spot, maybe a little later. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think given his age, if he stays healthy, So I think he'll go in the top 25 next year in running backs.
All right, so if you're gonna add that, then I'll go from like a 3 on boldness to like I'll give you a 3.5. I think, yeah, because that's kind of a parlay. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so you mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs before. This is gonna get some people angry. I love Jahmyr Gibbs. Here comes the but the bold prediction is he's going to score outside the top 3 rookie running backs in total and or points per game in basic PPR scoring for 2023. A lot of people will just cite yards per route run, targets per route run, targets, right? Like, and I get that. Those are often very predictive metrics, and I just use a lot of them for Christian Watson. But those, have context. And just like there's context with Watson as far as, a Hall of Fame quarterback in a small sample size or whatever to punch holes in that case. I think the argument against Gibbs for those particular stats is that at Georgia Tech, he was a big fish in a little pond. Like, who else is going to give the ball to? And then at his time in Alabama, was when they had uncharacteristically bad wide receivers for as far as their recent history goes. So again, who else are you going to throw the ball to? And then when you peel the onion further and you look at something like a 53% snap share at Alabama, hardly ever used inside the 20 for anything, especially inside the 10. I know that his receiving upside is transcendent, right? And I know we probably expect him to get a good number of targets. And I know that a target is worth 2.3 times what a carry is for a running back. But for me, there needs to be at least a little bit of an expectation of rushing volume to go along with that. If we're going to say that this guy is going to be ranked as our Dynasty RB2 before he's even taken a snap, right? And so I question the volume that he's going to be able to get, especially any volume with rushing. And I think related to that is his size. He's not A-Chain. He's not Deuce Vaughn. He's a fine size for what you're going to ask him to do, likely. But he's not really a fine size for usually the type of running backs that really hit. The top 24 running backs in fantasy football and PPR in the last 3 years. So that's 72 different entries into the contest. I believe only 3 of them were below 205, right? And so, he's right at that cusp. He's like a little bigger than James Cook because James Cook is down at 190 now. And, I just think he's going to be an exciting guy. I think he's going to be a guy who we're going to like on our teams. I think he's going to be efficient and explosive. I just think in the first year, it's some boldness, I think, to say he's going to be number 4 or lower among rookie running backs, right? Because really, like, who else besides Bijan? So that's kind of where the boldness is. That's kind of where I gave you a little bit about the plausible case, just a little bit more about why it's plausible. His best shot to hit and really get out front of this is with J-Mo out the first 6 games and with them developing a rookie tight end. But he's a rookie himself, and they take a while to develop. So his best shot is when he's probably going to be slowest. And we already saw in the first game, they limited his snaps. And Laporta got 5 catches, right? Also, Monty's a better pass catcher than Jamal Williams was, right? So there's less of a distinction between the skill sets than there was between Swift and Jamal Williams. Now, that may lean in Gibbs' favor because he's a better runner than Swift and he'll stay on the field more. It could lean in Monty's favor too, where he'll stay on the field in some situations where we would want maybe Gibbs to be on there for long down and distance or 2-minute drill or something like that. And also people will just hammer you over the head with who's taken with the first pick, first round pick, top 12 pick. They're going to use him. They have a plan for him. Did you see the way the room reacted when they drafted him? I get all that, right? But the rooms can react like that because they fit their system. And that's what the Lions did with the draft. They were excited to get the piece that fit their puzzle. That piece fitting their puzzle that they want to use is a big improvement over Swift. It doesn't mean it's going to be hella touches, right? It does mean it's an improvement over Swift. See later on in that round when they were sort of critiqued for overdrafting Jack Campbell, but you know what? He fit their system, so they overdrafted him. So just because you spent the number 12 pick on him doesn't mean that you're going to give him 7 million touches. It just means that he's a great fit for your team. So, that's why it's a little bold. That's why it's a little plausible. What say you, Jahmyr Gibbs, outside the top 3 rookie running backs in scoring?
Yeah, everything you said is exactly why I was telling everyone, please take JSN over Jahmyr Gibbs in rookie drafts. Because especially with Montgomery on the team, there's a much clearer path for JSN transcending his team and being like the number 1 guy on the team. Like even though I love DK Metcalf, I could see JSN being the wide receiver 1 by the end of the year. I just didn't see that for Jahmyr Gibbs because he is under 200 pounds, as much shit as we gave Devon Achane. Jahmyr Gibbs is a little undersized, and they had him out playing slot receiver some, but I still don't really – he might be pretty good at that, but nickel corners are not what they used to be. You don't just put your worst corner at nickel. Teams put really good corners and safeties at nickel, so – I think it's going to be a slow burn, kind of like Tony Pollard. His first 2 years, he never surpassed 500 rushing yards, but looked good when he was out there, and he's got a shot. So I'm still in on him in Dynasty, but I definitely think people that own him should temper their expectations for this year. So I agree. I'll give it a 2 out of 5 because I was not down on Gibbs, but I kind of saw this coming, and I could see that happening.
Yeah,
but he was efficient when he got the ball, so there's going to be some big plays. So I think a few boom games could spike his value a little bit.
Yeah, it depends, right? Because I think you and Jesse are with me on this one, so it doesn't seem too bold to you, but I think to a lot of folks, they would laugh at me. A lot of folks already have him at Dynasty running back 2. I mean, I've got him at 9. And he's kind of moved up and down between 7 and 11 all off season. So. I'm not leapfrogging him over Saquon and CMC yet, or even Jonathan Taylor. Come on.
I got him at 12, so
yeah,
I'm with you.
No. All right, what's your next bold prediction for 2023?
So I'm going to go with the one that's kind of similar to the one you just did, and it's someone that you really like, so it should be interesting. I'm going to say Dalton Kincaid will be the 3rd or worse best tight end this season, and I double down by saying it's going to be behind Michael Mayer and Sam Laporta. And I came up with this before the Lions game on Thursday. I did this on Wednesday, but that just kind of reaffirmed what I showed. There's going to be some growing pains, but he's going to be a focal part of that passing offense just because I think they'd rather throw to him than Josh Reynolds or Khalif Raymond after Amon-Ra. So I think he's going to get plenty of targets. I don't know how many yards or touchdown he's going to get. The fact that he already got 5 catches his first game, that's pretty encouraging. Besides being a Notre Dame fan, I think Michael Mayer is a perfect tight end for the NFL. I don't think he's going to get pulled off at 3rd downs because he can't block. He's got some improvement to do there, but I think he'll be good. And I just don't know who else they're going to throw to besides Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers and Hunter Renfrow. So, out of those guys, I think they have less weapons to contend with than the Bills do. And I'll touch on another person in my honorable mentions. I'll throw it in at the end. But I just think there's more playmakers. You got Gabe Davis, who's healthy. I don't really like him that much, but he was playing injured. I think he's going to have a step up. I really like Khalil Shakir. I think it's going to be him and Dalton Kincaid fighting out for a slot because they do still have Dawson Knox, who's not great, but they like him. He's going to line up in line, I think, more than Kincaid will. So I just see a path to where he's the 3rd best, maybe even 4th behind Musgrave if he gets a lot of looks too. Their receivers stay hurt. But I still have him ranked above those 2 guys in Dynasty, but I think this year it might be a little bit of a slow burn.
I could see that. All the reports were that they were playing around with creatively using him and all that in camp, and he looked okay in the preseason, especially for a rookie. So I think when you look at the Raiders and I look at Renfro and Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams, right, and then I look at the Lions and I look at Amon-Ra and Gibbs, and then some mix of Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones, J-Mo, and whatever Khalif Raymond that they're throwing out there, right? And then I go to the Bills and I look at Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and actually, I mean, Deontay Hardy won out the slot job there, and so which really hurt me because I like Khalil Shakir. I could say roughly those groupings of weapons are similar in quality, right? The difference with the Bills that you bring up that I think is a good point is that their other tight end isn't going anywhere fast. They paid him money, has a great relationship with Josh Allen, and can stay on the field for all downs. I am a Kincaid truther. I am one of the people who preached he was well worth the bet at 110 in 1.5 premium leagues, and I even took him at 1.6 in a 2.0 premium, right? But I see where you're coming from. I see where this is plausible. I also see where it's bold relative to the streets, right? I mean, he's going off ADP at like tight end 6, in startups, and he's a rookie, right?
Yeah.
Now I get that he's not really a tight end, so he's gonna buck this rookie tight end trend, and that's where I think there's probably a slight hole in the theory. Is he's got an out where they could just kick Deontay Hardy to the curb for the most part, or Trent Sherfield or whatever, or Khalil Shakir, and just you're our slot wide receiver, Dalton Kincaid. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 5, because you also specifically named the players that would come before him.
Well, Mayer's kind of an afterthought in drafts because he's been going as like third tight ends on rosters. So
I would say that is a 3.5 as far as bold goes. Now, you know what? I'm going to up it to a 4. That's a 4 because not only are you going against the grain, but you're naming the 2 specific players that are coming before him. So he could be number 3, but if I don't know if it's Musgrave or something like that, then you lose.
Yep.
I don't know what you lose. I don't know what you win if you win, but yeah. So
fantasy receipts. Perfect
segue for my tight end bold prediction, and that is somewhat opposite. So I'm going to switch this a little bit from what I did with Dynasty Fever because I think I reversed the numbers that I wanted to use. So at least 2 rookies and at least 3 second-year players will be top 12 tight ends in total and/or points per game in 1.5 premium scoring. So that's at least 2 rookies and at least 3 second-year players will comprise at least 5 of the top 12. We've had 2 good tight end classes recently. 2022, I think, was surprisingly good. It started out as like McBride and Pray for Rain, and then we kind of mixed in some Dulcich, and then like I had guys like I loved Jelani. I had Likely and Bellinger and Ferguson, and and people in my top 10 tight ends, but we didn't think it was a great tight end class. And I think when you look at how they showed out, how they flashed in their rookie seasons, and what we expect from them moving forward, and how positive and optimistic we feel about them, I'd say the 2022 tight end class so far is outperforming our expectations and was an underrated class. Then you bring in 2023 class, which was widely already considered a really good class. One of the reasons that both these classes, one turning out better than we thought, and 2023 already a vaunted class, really has to do with what's going on in the NFL. From what I can tell, NFL teams are looking to be diverse, are looking to be versatile, are looking to come up with all sorts of ways to beat the defense. Take Buffalo, for example. They didn't have real good intermediate targets, which is one reason why they went and looked for Deontay Hardy and Dalton Kincaid. And also, they didn't really have a banger at running back, and so they added Damian Harris. So now what Buffalo is saying is, I've got an answer for too high. I've got an answer if you do this. I've got an answer if you do that, right? And part of that diversification in the NFL is also more use of 12 personnel, right? And, right, more use of what we call move tight ends, big slot tight ends, whatever you want to call them, tight ends that are really wide receiver tight ends. All of that together is really favoring these last two tight end classes, right? And so all that put together, I think we can get at least 2 rookies in the top 12 and at least 3 second-year players in the top 12 tight ends this year if you're using 1.5 premium scoring. So it's, I think, a little bold, right, because of the narrative about rookie tight end development and just tight end development in general, taking 3 years or all that jazz. It's a little bold when you look at the rankings that people have for this season in particular, but I think I made a good case as to why it's also a little plausible and why I'm, I think it's also slightly actionable to be optimistic and lean into guys like Musgrave and Likely and things like that, rather than take some, boring tight end that we think is safer.
Yeah, so at first when I was looking at it, I was looking at my rankings. I was like, this is going to be above a 4. But then I also thought about how a show we talked about the tight ends. It really doesn't take much to crack the top 12.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 600 yards and like 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But I do still think it's pretty bold because that is saying that, guys like, my top 12 only has 2 or 3 rookies or second-year guys in it. That means guys like Njoku, Kittle, Freiermuth, even Andrews or Kelsey, some of those guys are going to get booted out. And that's just, I see how it's plausible, but it's also kind of a bold take to me because I do like guys like Njoku, Evan Ingram, Schultz was a tight end 1 last year. So I think there's competition, but it doesn't take much. And I could see there being a pass. So I'll give that a 4 out of 5.
Hey, not that bold is good, but I'm a former straight A student, so I like getting high scores.
Well, and it shows you're taking a chance. Like bold predictions, you're like, Jamar Chase will be wide receiver 1. It's like, okay, that's not, So yeah, I like it.
I hope folks are appreciating that we're not doing bold for boldness' sake. We're not just coming out here with wild bullshit hot takes. I think we're making the case as to why these might be plausible, right? Like it may be the 80th percentile outcome or the 20th percentile outcome for some of these players or some of these situations, right? But it's within the range of outcomes. We're not saying, Deion Jackson and Anthony McFarland are going to be top 5 running backs.
Yeah. No, I agree. So my next 2, I think, are the ones that are less likely to happen. So we'll see. I'll go with this one. It's fun. It's not really Dynasty related because he's the Dynasty wide receiver 1. But I think Justin Jefferson has a chance to be the first 2,000-yard receiver this year. Every single year he's improved. His yards have improved. His targets have improved. And they lost the second wide receiver in the room is Jordan Addison, a rookie. So I think it's going to be him and Hawkinson. I think Addison's going to work his way in. And, he did get shut down 1 or 2 games last year, but he bounced right back. I think he's, Jamar Chase is up there between who's actually the best, but I think given the situation and lack of talent or lack of competition behind him, I wouldn't bet money this happens, but I could see a world where he ends up being a 2,000-yard receiver.
I'm going to give this a 4 on boldness. And I'll explain why, right? Because when we look at last year, Justin Jefferson had most of a season, not a full season, of Hawk. And then Osborne and Adam Thielen, right, who was, kind of dusty. And this season, he's got a full season of Hawk. And Addison, who, while a rookie and may start slow, is not dusty Adam Thielen. So there's actually, I think, more competition for him this year. And we would expect some regression with the Minnesota offense as far as, I think they threw the ball second amount of attempts in the NFL last year behind Tampa Bay. And they were like in a lot of back and forth one-score game. Like, I think the variance is going to maybe shift more towards the mean. So everything I just said is all factors working against this coming true. So therefore, I think, speaks to its boldness. So I would say that's a 4. Yeah, that's a 4 for me.
See, I'm always, if you're an elite player, I think getting help around you can just open things up more for you. Because the games where he did get shut down, he was getting double teamed a lot, and I just don't. To stay competitive against the Vikings, if Kirk Cousins is on, I don't think you can do that with Hockenson and even Addison, who are. So I think it could be a downfall, but it also could help him. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, just one of the.
No, I completely agree with you. Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm learning more and more, the more I'm into analyzing football, right, is how interconnected everything is. We like this guy because of the offensive environment, but the offensive environment is also kind of good because he's in it, sort of thing. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And same thing with this, right? The rising tide lifts all boats, etc. And having somebody there isn't necessarily another mouth to feed so much as it is draws defense away from you and contributes to the overall offensive environment, right? So it can go a couple ways. I think why it's target competition and maybe not necessarily help is because I don't know that the pie is going to grow much. I don't know that it can grow much off of last year. So like that slice has got to be like huge, I think. You know what I mean? So yeah. So I think that's why it speaks to the boldness, but certainly plausible for the reasons that you said. How many yards did he have last year?
1,800. He had 1,809 yards, and his yards per reception were the lowest of his career. So, but he had 80 first downs. So that's, and I think the run game is going to take a step back. I kind of like Madison, but at the same time, he's not Dalvin Cook. So I think there being a lot of close games in there. I think they'll be behind a little bit. Okay. So that's also was baked into it. The run game might take a slight step back.
All right, well, you heard it here first, folks. Go out and spend all your money on sports books betting that Justin Jefferson will eclipse 2,000 yards. All right. So I got 2 left. I got a quarterback and a running back. What do you want me to do?
My next one's another receiver, so go quarterback.
Justin Herbert will be the quarterback 1 in total and/or points per game scoring. In 6-point TD scoring, I have him ranked 4th in Dynasty. He's 4, 5, 6 across the board in all the sites that we usually reference. So why is it at least slightly bold? He would have to leapfrog some interesting names to do that, and he's not an elite rusher. Now, why is it plausible? If we look at last year. He had a low ADOT, which we think is going to increase with new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. We also think the overall offensive environment is going to be better with new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. Increased production. There's another wide receiver on board. As much as we are skeptical of QJ coming out of the gates fast, it's certainly an improvement over just having Allen Williams and Palmer there. Last year, Justin Herbert was playing with injured ribs for a big chunk of the season. And I think that limited him as far as the passes he was willing to make, as far as rushing and taking hits, right? And you could see he was really, gutting through a lot of games with those ribs. He also had Keenan Allen and Mike Williams missing time. And as much as we like to pick on aging Keenan Allen, when you look at his career, I believe that's the only season he really missed any significant time. So we can't expect there to be that much time missed from those 2 wide receivers this year. The offensive line continues to develop I believe he was without tackle Rashawn Slater for a while last year. on top of the ribs. He also does just enough rushing, to really be in there in our top 5-6 QBs to begin with. He's not a total zero with the rushing, so he can contribute that way, which helps the case of him getting there to QB1. He had 41 combined touchdowns in 2021 before that year last year with Lombardi, and now we've got Kellen Moore coming in. So Justin Herbert QB1, a little spicy, but I think also a little plausible. Who knows? A high ankle sprain for Patrick Mahomes, a couple off weeks for Josh Allen, and away we go.
Yeah, I kind of teetered with this as you went along. I drafted a lot of Justin Herbert, especially in redraft, because I was getting him pretty late, and even in the later startups, you get him at like 6th or 7th in the first round. A few years ago, I guess year before last, I just lost it. He had 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns. And even last year with just dinking and dunking, he had 4,725. I think if he adds, even just 400 rushing yards, which he's capable of doing, he had 300 in 2021 and a few touchdowns. I think that's just going to boost his value. He's going to need his receivers to stay healthy, but adding QJ really helped, because if you lose Mike Williams, you still got Josh Palmer. He's not great, but he's a pretty solid guy you can go to, and he's still pretty young. So I'll give it a 4 out of 5, and that's just because the competition ahead of him. You got Fields, Jackson. You got some guys who rely a lot more on rushing, but I think with the new offensive coordinator, there's definitely a line or an avenue for that to happen. And I really like Justin Herbert. I think he's just like pound for pound with talent. I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the league, probably top 3 when you talk about talent. He can do a little bit of everything, and he's got a really, really good deep ball and good arm. So I like it. It's just people in front of him.
Quick trade question. You've got a really young core in Dynasty. This is from Brittany. Would you take a trade where you get Metcalf and Devonta Smith and give up Waddle and Ridley? I don't usually like trades like this, like the same number at the same position for the same number of players at the same position. I never make trades like this for a few reasons. I probably don't do this. Well, I can poke holes in all 4 of these players. It's kind of a wash, really. Like for me, it's like my number 6 wide receiver and like my number 25 wide receiver in Ridley, and then like my number 11 wide receiver in Slim, and my number 16-ish wide receiver in Metcalf. So like just based on those ranks, I'm probably leaning toward the Metcalf side. He had a lot of end zone targets. It didn't end up in touchdowns last. Like I don't know. It's just not a trade that I would do. Like, you have a young core, but like, do you get any younger or older in this? Like, you get a little younger, like Metcalf's a little younger than Ridley, right? But I mean, Smith and Waddle is a wash. Like, I just don't see a reason to really make this trade, especially when Ridley's value could go up if he balls out.
Yeah, I think I'm keeping Waddle and Ridley just because I think Waddle's the best player in the deal. And like I said earlier, I think JSN's going to slowly make his way in there and be the guy. So I think you're basically getting 2 guys who might not even be the wide receiver A on their team. With Tyreek getting old, Waddle could easily step in as a 1. Ridley's already the 1, I think. So Ridley hasn't played in a while, and I'll touch on this when I speak on my honorable mentions. Ridley could be really hard to rank moving forward because he's at an age that says he's old, but he also doesn't have that much mileage on him since he sat out so long. So I think I'll just stick with what you got and keep the best player in Jalen Waddle.
All right. Your last of your top 5 bold predictions.
Yeah, I talked about this in the risers. I just can't quit the player, and that where I got him, it won't hurt me too bad. But Tank Dell, I think, is going to be the number 1 receiver on the Texans, and beating out Nico Collins, especially because I think he's going to be the main person he's got to compete with. So this one's simple. I just think he's a young player, so it might take some time to get going. But I think by the end of the year, he's going to have the highest target share. I think he's going to be a little bit more productive than Nico because he can line up outside and inside. And I think it's bold because they have a lot of really good veterans. It's already saying that Noah Brown, Robert Woods, and Nico are going to be the starting 3 wide receivers. So there's definitely not a super clear path to playing time right away. But I don't have any faith in Noah Brown and Robert Woods throughout the whole year. So I think something will happen. He'll get on the field, and he's going to be electric with C.J. Stroud.
I like it. Yeah, I think like you said, it's plausible because the competition isn't great, and he is a very good separator in college, and gets
It's really
yak
good in the
with
preseason too.
well. I mean, I think he made a couple plays that he's not going to make with first string, defenses that aren't playing vanilla defenses, and I don't know. Like, I'm not really a believer. We'll get into that in a second, but I think it's plausible also because we know that in PPR he could get heavily targeted. We know that Stroud supposedly loves him. So yeah, now the reason why it's kind of bold is that there is Nico, there is Woods, there is John Mechie there. It's also bold because one of the reasons I'm not a believer is one of the reasons it's bold is, he's about half my weight, and that usually isn't a good hit rate, for in the NFL. So I would say 3.5 on a scale of boldness for that. If you were going to say that Tank Dell would be like a top 3, like a top 36 wide receiver overall, like I'd say that would probably even bolder. But I think this is a 3.5.
I was going to do that, but I think it's going to be a slow start to the year. I think they're going to get veterans out there to help Stroud, but I don't think that's going to end up working out for them well because it's Robert Woods and Noah Brown.
So my final bold prediction, interestingly enough, on the Dynasty Saturday Night 5, where we're using a bold scale of 5, J.K. Dobbins will be a top 5 running back in total and/or points per game in PPR scoring in 2023. He has looked very good, explosive, often efficient, and underrated when healthy. He is further removed from his injury. There are other concerns around the other high-end backs so if we take a look at who you think is going to do well in 2023, right? Josh Jacobs, that could be a miserable offense. Jonathan Taylor, who knows how many games he's going to play. CMC, they're already talking about how much that, he already has surprisingly even splits with Elijah Mitchell as far as touches go when both are healthy. And Shani, because Shani's a dick, has already talked about not using CMC as much. Saquon, he's fairly safe, but, a year older. And, we don't know how great that offense is going to be with the 94 slot receivers they have besides Waller. I could probably, poke holes in a couple other names. Derrick Henry is 1 year older, and we think that offense isn't going to be very good and doesn't contribute much in PPR. So there's concerns above him, right? And now we also add in the Lord and Savior Todd Monken, which means faster pace, more plays. It could mean more passing to the backs, including J.K. Dobbins, who is probably underrated, as a receiver. He's not he's not Jahmyr Gibbs, right? But I think he's more competent than people think. And of course, as we said before, with this new OC, we've probably got a rising tide lifts all boats situation. Lamar runs a little less. There is the concern that Monken, besides passing to backs, likes to rotate backs a lot. Let's look at the backs that he's going to be rotating with. Gus Edwards, he is what he is. He's a plotter. He's a year older. I don't think he's very good for the system. Justice Hill, I'm a believer, as far as like him being a good receiving back that can contribute, but I don't think he's going to take all that many touches away from Dobbins. And then you've got outside shot Keaton Mitchell, who, has been buzzy and has risen up rankings, but, he's like, what, 5'7", 187 or something like that, right? So I just think there's pieces coming together that are going to make this a Dobbins year. I'm a buyer on Dobbins. I'm a believer in Dobbins. And I think there's enough concerns with other backs that are above him. And I probably even forgot a couple off the top of my head. Like, who's safe? Pollard, Chubb? Who else do you really feel safe about? Like, I don't know. So, J.K. Dobbins, top 5.
I'm going to have to change my rating here. I was looking at it, and there really is a pretty clear path. I have J.K. Dobbins 15th in my Dynasty rankings, which I haven't really looked, but I feel like that's a little bit above market. the guys in front of him that I could see dropping out, Ramondre could, Zeke could vulture some touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs is not being used a ton. Javonte Williams coming back from an injury. They got Piron. We don't know what Swift's going to do. Etienne now has Tank. Eckler is a pretty good lock. Pollard's a pretty good lock.
But even Eckler might not be as many checkdowns with Kellen Moore, and
true.
He's 28. Maybe they use Spiller and Joshua Kelly more near the goal line. I don't know.
No, yeah, and then you got Brees. He's also coming off injury. I saw him number 2, but this year I don't.
Right,
I don't have
got
too many
Dalvin Cook there.
Bijan's a rookie. They also got 3 other running backs that have shown to be able to produce. They used Cordell Patterson a lot in the red zone last year too. So I don't know. He's going to be used. Yeah, I'm going to give that a 3.87.
Okay.
I ran the data in my head there real quick.
All right.
I was going to go above 4, but there's some question marks above him based on my rankings. So I like it. I've talked about it. I love Todd Monken. I love Lamar Jackson. The only downside is maybe Jackson eating into the touchdowns, but I don't think they're going to try and run him as much if they don't need to. Like if they got J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, he doesn't need to run as much as they've been running him, especially I think they want to keep him healthy. So,
well, speaking of eating, I know you have some dinner plans tonight, but you've got a couple honorable mentions for bold predictions that you want to talk about.
Yeah, these are going to have no explanation. I'm just going to Calvin Ridley, I think, will finish. Well, I don't think, but Calvin Ridley will finish as a top 10 wide receiver and be impossible to rank moving forward in Dynasty. And because he already had a top 5 last full season he played, looked really good. This season he did. He didn't play a full season. And I think the other one is I think Gabe Davis is going to come off my shit list this year. It's a very small list. I would probably just leave George Pickens on there. But I think Gabe Davis is – I don't think I've been putting into account that he was not healthy and trying to go out there and produce when you're not 100% healthy, especially when you're still limited route tree. But I think it does take away from some of your ability. So
yeah, I think when you look,
I think he's going to have a better year.
When you look at Ridley, when he was wide receiver 4, no Julio, and that was his only elite season. Now, I whiffed because one of the things that I didn't like about Amon-Ra was that at the end of his rookie year, it was all coming, for the most part without Swift and Hawk there, and so I had my doubts. So there is something to be said for when you're the only guy and you do well, that you are good, right? So the age and the rust, I think it's a slight concern, but he certainly has looked really good. With Gabe Davis, I think he's so hated that now he's overrated. I mean, underrated, and people are I mean, he finished wide receiver 36 last year with like a high ankle sprain. And now you add the fact that you've got a better running game and intermediate targets to then draw the defense's attention away and maybe open up more for Gabe Davis downfield. I think now he's going to be all of a sudden like, oh shit, we kind of shit on him too much. He's actually not that bad.
I'm a main hater. My wife tells me I'm a professional hater, and it's the easiest thing for me to do. But I think I got to stop.
How much does the professional hater job pay?
None. It gives me when I'm wrong, I get laughed at and made fun of.
But you're not fed off people's angst and tears.
No, well, depends on the person.
Your hatred fuels me. Have you seen that Rick and Morty episode where they do the heist thing? That's so good.
Yeah.
All right. So please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review if you're listening to the Going for Two live podcast audio feed. Please make sure if you're watching us here on the video situations that you like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz, notifications, and bing, bing, da-boom, ba-da-boom, and feed the algorithm because it helps us. Next week, we will have Jacob Sanderson on to talk all things running backs. And what's interesting is, we missed him a couple times, but now we'll also be able to unpack week 1 RB usage through the lens that we've been using to predict these running backs for the season. Going for Two has a podcast for you just about every night. Go to goingfor2.com for all sorts of fantasy content. Also on goingfor2.com in the bottom right is the little purple thingy for the Discord. Lots of channels, great conversations. We have our own channel. Jamie's in there showing trades that he robs people in Dynasty. I always joke that he's playing with toddlers, but he's just really good, I guess. Time for plugs. Josh, tell us where folks can find you and your work.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut. Recently, I've really only been tweeting about the Braves and Ronald Acuna making baseball history. He's on pace now for 40 home runs and 70-something RBIs, which is absolutely insane. So that's mainly what's been taking my focus. Week 1's here, though, so I'll probably start taking some shitty takes onto Twitter. So you can find me there at Rotonaut. You can find my Dynasty and weekly rankings on goingfor2.com once the season starts. I will be doing weekly rankings. Just put those in. So.
Ugh, that's a grind. That's a
Well,
grind.
I'm not doing articles, so it's the least I can do, I think.
So Jamie says he had pizza for dinner and is wondering what we're eating. What's bulgogi meatballs? What's that?
Bulgogi, it's some kind of sauce. We've been doing HelloFresh since we moved. It's a cheap way to get meals without, eating out. So I haven't tried it, so I'm about to go make them.
I don't think I've ever heard of that. I've heard of bolognese. I haven't heard of bulgogi.
That's on next week's docket.
So Jamie, tonight it's kind of late. So if I feel like cooking, it's gonna be a tempeh with vegetables and probably either sweet chili sauce or peanut sauce. Stir fry with vegan egg rolls as well. And if I don't feel like cooking because it's late, I'll just shove a couple spoons full of peanut butter in my mouth and call it a night. You can find my rankings and articles at goingfor2.com. I also host Dynasty Fever podcast. That's audio only at Dynasty Fever Pod. You can find me on Twitter at @FFJunkie_, where you can attack me for said bold predictions and all other mediocre fantasy takes. We appreciate you staying with us all off season. We're finally here on what I think is the real kickoff to the NFL season, the first Sunday. I don't really believe in primetime football, but that's just me. And so, everybody enjoy the games if you're lucky enough to have time to kind of consume a little bit of them tomorrow. It's time for 7 hours of Scott Hansen's Iron Bladder. So that's going to be a wrap for us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And
go Irish.